Good day and welcome to Rocket Podcast, Conversations to Take You Places. I'm so excited for today's episode because we have Growth Matters in the studio. We've got why sales managers may be your secret weapon. I'm so excited to have Alan and Tony. Alan, the Chief Revenue Officer at Growth Matters, and Tony, the CEO of Growth Matters. Together, they are wanting to help 1 million people in the profession of sales. There's a whole story just in that byline. And Alan, I would love to just ask you, what is your background? How did you get to Growth Matters, and why 1 million people?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it as short as possible. But long story, I was in electronic engineering. I read a book called You're Born an Original, Don't Die a Copy. And it said that if you're hating what you're doing for more than 2 weeks, stop. And I was already 2 years into it. So I thought, okay, this isn't for me. I went into sales and don't end the podcast now, but got fired from my first 4 sales jobs.
Oh, wow.
But I was doing everything they told me to do. I got 100% for my product knowledge tests. They said I needed to be more motivated. And I was so excited you could weld with me, right? But I became the world's best talking brochure. And I couldn't figure it out because I couldn't figure out how by taking the advice, I wasn't getting to sales success. And then I worked under a manager, and it's that manager that really changed my life and unlocked that. And then I started thinking about sales as a profession, not just a job, and got really curious about what drives sales performance. And then fast forward a few years as a top performing sales professional, started a company to train sales professionals. And although we had a lot of good commentary, there wasn't enough impact and there wasn't enough adoption of the methodologies. And it came to a realization that the gap was sales managers, right? We haven't enabled sales managers to execute key disciplines. And that's when I founded Growth Matters, hooked up with Tony, and really focused initially about how do we make sure we impact 1 million people, the Allens out there, in the profession of sales, but by focusing on enabling sales managers, because they are high leverage resources that, if enabled, can unlock the potential in others. So that's about the shortest version I can give of that,
Wow,
Dan.
that was amazing. That's an elevator pitch we can envy. Tony, it must have been a little bit like sipping from a tsunami when Alan walked into your life. What were you busy with at that stage when this energy bunny came in and changed the way your trajectory was going?
Like this whirlwind of energy, as you say, Dan. So I was running a large sales team for a listed South African company. And I was working with the 7 sales managers and the more or less 100 sales professionals. And I started collaborating with Alan, and like you say, this energy and this, real fountain of information and knowledge. And we started to brainstorm, and, Alan posed the question to me one day. He said, great sales training that he was providing to the market, but where's the impact? It was great sales training, get good scores, good reflection, but where's the impact? And we started brainstorming the ideas, and we, as Alan shared, we came to this conclusion that said, the pivotal point, the custodian of the sales ecosystem is the sales manager. And we started building the pieces to enable the sales manager. And it's been, I would like to say, a whirlwind adventure there, Al. It certainly has flown past the many years we've now worked together. But definitely, the energy that Alan brings, and obviously now we're starting to scale, and we're really trying to impact the lives of 100 million, I wish, 1 million people in the world of sales.
I've done the SMDP program. I've delivered the course myself, and it still impacts my world like a 10-ton weight dropping on my toe. It's massive. And I don't think I'm the only one that has this revelation every time we start diving into things like pipeline management, like managing self, like coaching our staff. And this has been missing from so many salespeople. Why is it so obvious to you, Al? And why do we always see companies reverting back to, well, just teach the salespeople how to sell and everything will take care of itself?
Look, I think that's the key way we've been brought up. If we teach the behavior, we get the results. But what we see in top performing sales teams, and in actual fact, if you take it outside of sales, in any top performing team, it's about that manager. And I think the reason the SMDP has such a profound impact is there's an unseen void and a practical bridge across it, right? So our best story is a good friend of ours, Ron, participant on our program, senior sales manager. And he said the first day to Tony, he says, Tony, I don't know why I'm here. I told my boss to be here. and I'm not quite sure there's anything new I'm going to learn. So I'm going to sit through day one and we'll take it from there. And he's probably one of our greatest custodians now, because what he says is there were gaps. And there are gaps, Daniel, because when you go from a sales professional to a sales manager, it's a different mindset. It's a different thing you need to do. And very seldom do we enable those people to then get really good at establishing those execution disciplines. But the next piece, Dan, it's got to be pragmatic, right? There's enough theory out there, there's enough information. You've got to be able to step away and tomorrow go and improve your pipeline health, or accelerate your deal success, or better communicate value, or prioritize your impact more effectively. There's those key disciplines that we focus on. But I think it's that awareness that, hey, I didn't realize there was a void, and boy, I can be far more effective if I close it. And he has a practical way to do that.
I've heard people say, I felt like I've been faking this for so long, and finally I can see there's a path to go. What is your true north, Tony? Where are you taking Growth Matters from filling this void? Nature hates a void, and I think you're stepping into it. Where are you taking sales management?
Well, Dan, I mean, as you said in the intro, 1 million people in the profession of sales. So if you break that down, there's 4 main roles in the profession. So we work with sales leaders, and where are their gaps? Well, they have to set the strategy. They have to build the right culture. They have to manage these internal alignment challenges that they seem to grapple with every day. And then we move to the sales enablement team. They've provided technology, they've provided support, and they've provided training, but maybe the people aren't using it. Then we have the sales professionals, and the sales professionals is a really tough job. It was tough before COVID, with virtual selling, and perhaps it's even gone up a level of toughness. So what's going on in the world of a sales professional? And then the pivot point, as we always talk about, is the sales manager, the toughest job in the profession of sales. It's the hardest job. So what we do is we look at the gaps in each of those roles, because they are very role specific. When you talk about sales managers, they have to execute. In a nutshell, they have to execute. So where are those execution gaps that we can help with? And that's obviously the sales management development program.
Okay. So you're stitching together a clear line for people to follow so that they can focus on the important things, which is their customer and their staff, as opposed to thinking these things up. Now, I'm going to circle back to the SMDP, into the course itself. Between Al and the team, you guys are running an international business now. Yeah, I said a couple of weeks ago, the sun doesn't set on Growth Matters empire, What is your big, hairy, audacious goal for 2022, Al? Where are you taking this beast?
I mean, Dan, I can just share that the answer to that question, because Alan's going to take 25 minutes to answer that, because and we've done lots of thinking and lots of brainstorming around what is it, the objectives, the goals for this year 2022. But if we had to boil it down to one thing, we're going to 10x our audience.
Wow.
So we are going to 10x the audience with free content. So whether that's a blog, whether that's a newsletter, or our monthly global connects, we want to be moving from where we are now with a certain level of audience, 10x it. And perhaps next year it's another 10x, because we have great content and we have information to share, and we have great sharing from the people that are in our audience. So that's really, I would say that's our biggest goal for 2022.
Are you seeing people investing in this sort of learning easily, or is there an education that's going forward still that there's this gap that we need to be educating? When people talk around sales, they're talking about how do we present to a customer, or how do we find a customer? Al, do you want to take that?
Yeah, look, I mean, when we started out the business and decided the key focus on the sales managers as the enablers, it wasn't common in the market. And there was a significant amount of education required in that space. And then the research started to come out. So everything from Forrester to Gartner to CSO Insights, and pretty much said the number one investment you can make in your sales results and your growth is in the sales manager. But the challenge with that sometimes is we get caught up in the learner and the theory. So we see companies who have budgets, and what they're looking for is they're looking for growth, because growth matters, right? And the way they see that is we've got to enable our sales professionals. And we completely agree, you have to. But the reality is, if you take anyone, and I train you in mathematics, Daniel, and you don't have to practice it in the next year, you forget everything you learn because you have to be put into an environment that unlocks that learning. So we often see that sales training, unfortunately, is a tick box. We've covered our bases, they trained. So we got to educate business, say, wonderful, work on the train, get the latest technology, leverage that technology, make sure you're developing stuff. But that's the train, which goes nowhere if you haven't laid the tracks. So we spend time educating customers that the maturity of your execution disciplines is where all your other investments in sales enablement get unlocked. And that's the piece we have to bridge, because it's now we're getting put in you're training sales managers. And we're saying, yeah, but it's a framework of execution that gets those disciplines laid. And then you unlock your CRM potential, you unlock your training potential, you unlock your big data potential. But that doesn't happen. Simple thing. If you don't have a discipline of CRM hygiene in your business, CRM is just a great mechanism to send garbage out quickly. It can't do more than that. The discipline has to be laid. And that's the education. It's not sales, it's sales management development program so that they can embed execution disciplines to unlock your growth and unlock your potential. That's the education that's required there, Dan.
Now, Al, you are front of house most of the time, and you're seeing this all over the world. It must have been an interesting journey from where you were doing a lot of traveling and training, and then we had a little change in the world, a little blip that came about, and the traveling stopped. And I remembered you had just moved to Johannesburg, and you had just stayed in a smaller flat, and you were away from the coast. What kind of thinking did you do, and what did that do for Growth Matters from a boundary perspective and a geographic perspective? Because we've spoken about your global business, which it is now. How is that enabled now?
Yeah, then I'm going to get to two parts. So I want Tony to talk about the yang to my yin. So there's an upside to technology, right? So in this situation specifically, you understand, Sam, I was supposed to see 22 cities in 2020, and I saw Johannesburg, right? And when the news came that, our job, well, effectively a core part of our role was we would get into planes, meet people in a room, facilitate training, and then go have a few beers together, right? It was a very social world we were in. And when this news broke, I thought, how are we going to survive? And I think sometimes we forget the blessings we have, because you do that same thing to our business 4 years prior, and we wouldn't have survived this, right? So technology unlocked it. But the other thing is that we didn't just do a lift and shift. We rebuilt all our content from the ground up to make sure we could address this time in history, or this, I wouldn't say the new normal, but the normal that was current then. And fortunately, I say with grace, technology allowed us to remain relevant, allowed us to get reach, and allows us to continue to expand our global business. And that's the big win. But Tony and I are sometimes a bit skeptical of tech, because there's a lot that we see in sales where, and you alluded to it earlier, where tech is people are hiding behind that mouse. So Tony, I know you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, Al, we talk about technology such as CRM. So this golden nugget, this genius that was customer relationship management software, was born, probably 2 decades ago. And it was going to change the world of sales because we would manage our customers better. But in reality, it had almost an unexpected negative consequence in that sales managers started to manage people by mouse. They were behind the desk. They were managing using, data, for example. Now, is it important? Of course, it's important. But how would you manage a sales pipeline of 100 or more opportunities if you don't have technology? So it's a great piece of technology, there is no doubt. But it's now moved to the point where, as I was saying, managers are not doing the people element of their job, their leadership element. So they really need to be out in the field as part of it. But, for example, you're aware, Dan, we preach the message over and over again around one-on-one coaching conversations with your people. You don't do that from behind the desk unless we're in a virtual world when you can do that. But it's still you and the other person. It's a one-on-one conversation. It's not you looking at data or looking at the 15th report that you've seen this week. So I think that was both the upside, but also the downside, or the negative, unexpected consequence of technology as it related to the world of sales.
And Tony,
I just want to add a Growth Matters one-liner in there.
Yeah.
Changing pivot tables doesn't change behavior. Right? Technology is an enabler. It's not the whole thing, right?
Oh, another mic drop there. I've got so many nuggets here, guys. This is like a Hallmark card. So that's amazing. And I really enjoy that. Are you managing to use these tools yourselves, Tony, to unlock international clients? And what role is technology playing in this for you to open doors to get Growth Matters out there on an international stage?
No, absolutely, Dan. You know, we all talk about Zoom or Microsoft Team meetings. We talk about this concept of online or virtual selling. And we're no different. We're out there promoting our business and we're selling virtually. So I actually had a call this morning. So for my sins, I'm in Mauritius. Ellen is in Johannesburg. You could be somewhere else in the world. But I had a call with a prospect in Switzerland. And we spoke as if it's the only second interaction I'm having with him, but we already have built up some rapport. Okay. And we were joking and we were talking about the world of virtual, and we had a great sales call. It was 30 minutes. So a 30-minute sales call where perhaps if we were driving somewhere or flying somewhere, it would have taken much longer. So technology certainly can speed up the sales process. There is no doubt.
And so it also helps us with the reach of support once you know, because we believe you've got to coach the coach to coach. So a big part, Daniel, is no point just having the content. You also got to support those managers along the journey. And the beauty now is the luxury of technology. You can be coaching 3 senior sales leaders at 4 a.m. in the morning in Australia, not the ideal time zone, right? But, you know, Latin America at 7 o'clock in the evening. And although, I mean, besides the time zones, the fact is you have that flexibility to add that next layer of support. And I'd add the one thing that the pandemic did do is it got us more comfortable to be in these spaces. So is it always ideal? No. But now the norm of coaching, supporting, and selling online is not this foreign idea, right? So we're excited about the hybrid future because there are some wins that technology has brought.
Do you think the buying cycles have changed in the past 3 years and 3 years? And what would you say is the biggest change that you've noticed?
But Dan, I love this question because one, I have to field it often. And I think sometimes we're looking for something that isn't there. I think the buying cycle at a high level hasn't changed dramatically. We have a recognition of needs. We have to evaluate our options. We have to negotiate what we need. And we have to implement it. You know, at a very base level, that's what happens. Yeah. It's the challenge that's happening internally in organizations. So pre-pandemic, we already had the first problem was we have the paradox of choice. There's just too many suppliers, too many vendors, too many options. I mean, you just take sales enablement as an example. How many technologies? You know, you can run a list of 100 and you haven't scraped the surface of the amount of people wanting to use technology to help sales professionals. And that's wonderful. But it's not wonderful when I don't have a framework for making a decision. So now you throw the pandemic into that and people aren't as collaborative initially in that space. So we've got too much choice. We've got a low amount of collaboration, and this creates the confusion. So I would say that the number one barrier right now that has slowed down and created change in the buying cycle is the inability to turn information into insights. So they're more confused. You know, it was, I think, Gartner who dropped a white paper last week around sense making, either Gartner or Forrester. But really, it's about the fact that the number one thing your buyer is struggling with is to make a decision and make sure it's the right one. They're trying to make sense of all this noise. And that's what's happened is there's been a lot of noise in the system. And the pandemic added to that. But there's just more choice and more options and more demos and more, you know, let us get you onto our platform and just try it out. And, you know, everyone's pushing, but we've got to help the buyer make a buying decision, even if their buying decision is not in your favor, Dan. That's the number one thing you can do as a sales professional to accelerate the buying cycle.
Wow, there's a moment there. Even if it's not in our favor, we've got to be ethical about our industry and about what we're doing and getting the buyer to make the right decision. Even if it doesn't work for us. It's tough when you've got a quota though. You know, it's you finding square pegs for round holes, but that's what you've got in your armament. It takes a very strong sales.
Word of mouth we've been talking about in sales for a century. Word of mouth is now technologically enabled. You know, don't do it because you're looking for a referral, but trust me, that gets out. When you become the person that Sherpas a buyer through their buying decision, even if that's not in your favor, that doesn't get forgotten easily, Dan.
No.
And you know, you got to have the right opportunity. So Tony would argue this slightly differently, I guess. make sure your sales strategy is clear, that you're fishing where the fish are with the right bait, where your differentiation is clear.
Sure.
So you've got to start on the right footing. But sometimes you're not the right choice, and you've got to be bold enough to say, I'm glad I've helped you make a decision that wasn't me. Right.
But I heard you say that to someone about their job. And I think you talk about courage the whole time, and about making the right decisions for yourself in your life. You know, if you're in the right job, if you're selling the right thing, you're going to be in the right place in your head. And if it's wrong, you need to move. Well, if you had to...
No one's had a sleepless night for being ethical. That's what I'll say there.
Wow. Al, if you could sit next to a sales management guru, who would it be? And what would the one question be you would ask them? And it can't be Tony Cross, because that's cheating.
Yeah, so it'd be Tony Cross. It'd be when's my next leave.
Yeah.
It's interesting because there's a lot out there, but the person whose brain I want to pick is Jason Jordan.
Okay.
He was co-author for the book Cracking the Sales Management Code. And what I loved about the book, it was a data-driven approach to what's actually happening. And, you know, it was an international bestseller. And really what he was saying to businesses was our ability to capture information has accelerated beyond our ability to translate that into insights, right?
Okay.
And he said that most organizations are measuring too many things. Average metrics are 306. So you've got to simplify that down. The question I asked Jason is, with all that fame, with being on the speaking circuit, by being all of the conferences, why did no one listen? Why are we sitting with the same problem of over metrics, over measuring, right? Because the only reason you measure something is to improve it. And the more you measure it, the more you're likely to fail. So a great book called How Did That Happen? Around the minute you go beyond 6 or 7 clear expectation, accountability falls off the side of a mountain. Tony always says it's better than me, but it falls off a cliff. And there's not Tony and Ellen or GrowthMatters. That's the research. That's the data. Yeah. Right. So that's what I ask him. When we got all this insight, why do we act like we never read the book?
That's amazing. I like that a lot. So I'm going to ask a tough question of Tony. Tony, a top tip for the day. If we understand what Elle said, if we acknowledge the fact that we've analyzed this thing, we've got too many reports, what are the top 4 reports we should be looking at? And if it's top 3 reports we should be looking at in order to drive through our sales effectively, in your opinion?
And it is a tough question because, as you say, there's many things you can be doing. Number one for me would be, are your managers coaching? So if I was a sales leader, my number 1 report would be, talk to me about how often you're coaching your people one-on-one and what you're talking about. So that would be a report that I would look for straight out of the starting blocks. You know, what is the coaching going on, and is it actually happening? The second one is I would be scrapping, heaven forbid, I would be scrapping forecasting reports and replace them with pipeline reports. Okay, and I know that's going to be controversial. Of course, you need forecasting reports, but if you only had to have one, it would be much better to have a pipeline report.
Tell me the difference between them. Tell me the difference between them for you, just for our audience.
Yeah, so a forecasting report or a forecast review is all about risk. You know, what is the risk of us not making this month's number, this quarter's number? So it's very much an upward corporate type of report, where a pipeline review is, are we going to make the number? But what is the health of our pipeline, both for now, this month, and into the future, next month, next quarter, next half year, which is probably or arguably more important. So again, as a sales leader, I would want both. But if I had to only have one, and I had to spend time only on one of those two, it would be about the pipeline. Because if you have a strong, healthy pipeline with value, with volume, with velocity, and in the right shape, you're going to have an okay forecast.
Yeah.
But talking about a forecast, talking about this month's number, are we going to hit the target? Are we going to hit the target? Can't we hit the target, guys? Actually doesn't help you hit the target. So that would be my number 2 suggestion. And then it would probably be around a report on your big deals, because if you're not managing opportunities well, then you're not going to achieve your number. So many times we work with sales managers and they're very busy. Their people are very busy, but they're not necessarily busy on the right things. So it would definitely be what we call an allocation of effort report. Where are they spending their time? What do their priorities look like? And some of these are not traditional reports that you push a button and it comes out of your CRM system. But CRM systems, if they're tracking activity and they're tracking, trends, you can get this kind of information. And like Alan said so well, you can turn that information into insight that leads to better decisions.
So I want to summarize that. Our top tip is, are your managers coaching in one-on-one sessions? We want to focus on pipeline report and looking at the health of your pipeline, volume, value, and velocity. That's a whole discussion for another podcast. And then you want to pick on the big deal management to manage the activities within those big deals. And if you've written your CRM or you've configured your CRM correctly and your HR system correctly, you should be able to get these reports out. But it cuts the noise of the system reporting that you got. So you don't need 100 reports. You need 3 or 4 reports. Al, I can see.
Dan, if I could just sum that in a way we see it is, we talk about asking the big question. The pipeline says, what is the risk? The forecast says, what's the risk? And then the pipeline says, what's our contingency plan should that risk become real? And the opportunity management says, how do we mitigate that risk happening? So if I look at my forecast and I know my risk, and what we tend to do is, we see senior leadership, you need to commit. It's the wrong question. What is that risk? And if it's in the opportunity, what do we do to mitigate the risk in the opportunity? And should we fail to mitigate that risk, so that's opportunity management, we have to go to the pipeline for our contingency. So the forecast is the risk, the pipeline is the contingency, and the opportunity is where you actually manage the health of your forecast, because you're going to win it if you control the deal.
Awesome. Al, you guys are content creators. We spoke before this, you're getting ready for another one of your big interventions, and I want to get a little bit more information on that. Every month you give out a huge amount into the market. How do you keep producing stuff? Where do the ideas come from?
I read and I read and I read and I read. So that's part of it. Obviously, with the luxury we now have, Dan, having been established for so long, we've got a lot of people we work with, a lot of track record, a lot of things we can leverage off of. I think by nature, where Tony and I are so fortunate, is we have similar minds, but they have different strengths. So I'm always looking for what's the big picture, so the framework stuff. And then Tony's looking for the process. How do you make this practical and make it happen? So that's part of the areas, what we see in the field, what we read and research. Tony, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, Dan, I just see this quite simply. There's no shortage of ideas. It's really about taking an idea, whether it's from a podcast or like Alan said, reading, or wherever you come up with an idea, but you've got to go and execute. Many of the leaders, the Bill Gates and others of the world will tell you straight out, we can have great ideas, we can have a vision, but if you can't turn that into execution, which again is the job of a sales manager. So yes, we come up with great content, but there's no shortage of ideas. There's no shortage of topics or discussion points that we can come up with, or challenges or problems to solve for sure.
Yeah. So the secret's not on the ideas, it's on the execution on the ideas and creating the content. And I think that you guys have got it down pat, or you've got a recipe that you follow. How much of that is systemized and how much of that is more manual, sticking together until it gets momentum?
Dan, yeah, if I can answer that question, it would be lovely if that was just automatic and it was all automated and you put in idea and end result just pops out the other side. That would be fantastic. But what we really have focused on in the last 2 years is building what we call the cookie cutter. What are the structures, what are the frameworks that we need, whether it's building a new module or it's building a new talk or a global connect. What does the cookie cutter look like? And then Alan and myself, we also have this term, perhaps it's because of my love of coffee, we call it percolating. So we'll have an idea, we'll talk about it, and we'll percolate. And then we'll meet up again, and then we'll discuss it, and then we'll percolate some more, and then finalize it. So again, that's, to your listeners, your audience, I would be saying, if you can really try and get things iterative, it's really powerful. Often I think we move from, in any field, we move from, start to 100 in one step because of all the pressure that we're under and all the time constraints that we're under. I would strongly suggest try and build in some iterative steps for your brain to process, or what we call percolate, because that really builds a stronger idea And if you can collaborate, which, is one of Alan's favorite topics, if you can collaborate, around a central framework and with a shared vision, the power of turning the ideas into execution starts to realize itself.
Thank you for that. Do you want to add anything to that, Al?
No, I just think what Tony spoke about is, one of the pieces he's speaking about, though, is the critical importance of cadence. Bill Gates calls it his Think Week. We call it Week 13. It's also about the power of the questions you ask yourself when you're percolating. So one of the ones we ask is, what's wrong with our program, not what's right. We've got enough evidence about what's right. We want to find out what's that next piece we want to close. So just in this last iteration, we have an execution guide. We've got a learning portal. We've got, practical things they can take away to their teams. So we've got that team enablement piece. So all of that is continuously saying, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to execute. But if you get caught up in the ego of it, you don't then get into that iterative cycle that Tony's talking about. And so a friend of ours that taught us the power of that question: what is wrong with us? Right? Just find the gaps and don't beat yourself up. What do we have to prioritize? Let's go to that on our next level. So there's a continual iterative part. What we had to learn, though, I just want to add, it's one of Tony's mentors for this year, and we need it. You've also got to realize it's got to be good enough for long enough. Because my tendency will be, okay, that piece is right, that piece is right, that piece is right. But meanwhile, it's good enough for long enough. And sometimes because that we delay our value to market because you're waiting for everything to be perfect.
Get going, then get good is something else that you guys have taught me again and again and again. And, we had a guest on this show who's got 55 Udemy courses. And he said, people want the content. You have to get it out. And I think you guys epitomize that. You get the content out when customers are asking for it. Guys, when you decided Growth Matters would start offering services globally, what was the one thing that was harder than you anticipated, being based in South Africa and then going big?
Yeah, Dan, as we moved from in person, which used to be 3 or 4 interactions with a client and with a group of sales managers or sales leaders, that was difficult. But moving to virtual, when you suddenly had 20 sessions, for me, it's logistics. So the logistics and the planning suddenly spiraled almost out of control. And we often joke, we built a process from start to finish for one of our programs, and there were 158 unique steps in the process.
Sure.
And we were saying, wow, okay, it's almost like you need a team of people.
Yeah.
So in some ways that was both surprising, but also, overwhelming at some points, where we were saying, this is really going to be a challenge for us. So over time, we've simplified certain things and automated certain things. So the current process is around about 50 steps. But definitely the logistics was a big challenge.
So you've taken the Elon Musk eliminate steps where you can eliminate, and then add in where it falls over. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. And we also see the reason you have a process in anything is that you can start to improve in the different steps. So it's never one massive improvement that changes something. It's all of the small improvements that exponentially changes and improves something in our view.
Elle, if you had a webinar full audience to capacity, who would it be, and what would your first 5 minutes be about?
It would be chief executive officers, and it would be about what their CROs or their sales engines is not telling them. And this is a challenge we see, Dan. If you look at any entrepreneurial business, ownership will have line of sight of the sales engine. What tends to happen when we get into corporate is we're stepping away from that, and we're only looking at the data, not the people. Okay, and that's the key thing. So I ask CEOs often, what visibility and understanding do you have of your sales pipeline, and what visibility do you and the balance of the C-suite have in your top 10 opportunities? If the C-suite's not involved in the top 10 opportunities, you can't build a sales culture the way you want to. So I would speak to them about getting really, in touch again with not just the reports about sales, but what the meaning behind it is. And it's not because the CRO is trying to keep it from you. It's that there's so much data and so much information. We're not getting to those practical things that matter the most. What are those, that 1% of data that gives me 65% of the surety that we're going in the right direction? And when you shut that down, you don't have visibility of what matters. The organization doesn't align behind the sales, which means we don't close the value gap for the customer. So that's what I began, is really rallying around. You have to have a seat at the sales table, no matter where you are in the C-suite, because at the end of the day, a business only exists to sell something.
Wow. That is a mic drop again. That is such a nice way to bring us into the next section. If you had to give some advice for a sales leader today in this work from anywhere world, Tony, you've already given us 3 great tips. What advice would you take going on from what Els just said there?
Then I think 2 things. Number 1 is connection, and number 2 is consistency. So because we've now moved to the new normal, the next normal, another normal, whatever you choose to call it, you have to keep levels of connection, because I'm sitting in one location, somebody else is sitting. It's not the same as you saying hello at the water cooler or over a cup of coffee. It's not the same. We appreciate that. But in some ways, that's the easier part, because you can connect on a 15-minute Zoom call. The more difficult part is to make sure you keep consistency. So you still have to do a pipeline review. You still have to do an opportunity review. You still have to do coaching. You still have to build out an execution plan for a piece of strategy. And you have to make sure that you use your calendar. You have to make sure that you prioritize well. You have to make sure that you have a cadence. So for me, for a sales leader, you have to make sure that you are consistent, because when you are consistent, you build that discipline. And when you have the disciplines, as all of us know, when you're disciplined in anything, the results and success follows.
Sure, that's solid. Thank you. That's brilliant. El, if you had to start again, what 1 lesson would you take from Growth Matters, which you find is invaluable?
Was the 1 lesson I would take from Growth Matters? Of start again. No, that's a tough one. Tony, you want to field it?
Yeah, I mean, Dan, it's a great question. If there was only 1 lesson, what would it be? For me, it would be, it's about the customer. It's not about the product. It's not about the employees. It's not about it's about the customer. And if you're in any startup situation, in fact, if you're in any business at any stage, it's actually about the customer. So what Alan and the team are really good at doing is saying, if we change this, whatever it is in our sales ecosystem, how does that impact the customer? So, a key question to ask over and over again. I'm changing the sales remuneration policy. I'm changing, how we report. I'm changing call cycles, whatever they may be. How would this impact the customer? Should probably be your first and biggest question that you answer before making any of these changes in your environment, in the sales environment, or in your business.
Sure, that is a big answer there. I do have one for you, Al. And there's a lot of belief about sales out there, right, wrong, or indifferent. Everybody has an opinion on sales, and they seem to think that everybody can do it. And quite often it's tarnished with a brush of, all we do is play golf and sign orders. What is the 1 myth about sales that you would like to dispel?
Yeah, I'm gonna segue into Tony's one, because I know he has to have this say. Mine is that salespeople aren't born and they aren't made. Good sales professionals are built, right? They're part of high-performing cultures. They're coached, they're developed, they're supported where they need to get to. So yes, there may be some outliers who instinctively hit the ground running, but that doesn't mean that we can't build an effective sales team. And that's the key thing. We see so many leaders wanting to hire the heavy hitter or hire the unicorn or the maven, instead of saying, create a culture that is strong, create the disciplines that create execution, and you will unlock the potential of far more people, right? And then they're more loyal, and you've got more balance, because you don't have just these 1 or 2 heavy hitters. So they're not born, definitely not. You don't get to a maternity ward and it says salesperson above the name, right? And they're not made in terms of fact, they're just made, they're built. It's through the efforts of a sales manager in an organization that we can really unlock that potential. But this assumption that it's a gift of the gab and that's what you need, and I've never built for sale, not built for sales. Hey, to sell is human, as Daniel Pink's book would say. But the challenge is we're getting to a technology world where we think we can take shortcuts. And there's an assumption that the future is social selling. And I'm going to segue that into Tony's view of a big myth that needs to be dispelled.
Yeah, Dan, I mean, I wish you'd asked me this question. If there was one question I wish you'd asked me, what's the biggest myth in sales, Tony?
Okay, wait. Tony, what's the biggest myth in sales that you'd like to dispel?
Thanks for asking that great question, Dan.
Thanks. Yeah,
for me, the biggest myth that is so topical is that social selling is selling. In my personal view, and I'm sure Alan has a view, I don't believe social selling is selling. So I believe that social selling, as the term says, is all about connection. Yes, it's about networking. It's about growing your, your social marketing, absolutely, your online presence. And that's going to potentially create an opportunity for a conversation around, some needs that you then need to go and discover and discuss with a potential client. But if we think that social selling is selling, I think we have lost our way. I think we're going to end up with many sales teams out there that don't hit their numbers if we believe that social selling is selling.
Wow, I love that. And I was reading an article this morning about social selling being the new way to go. And I think we're being duped. I mean, people buy from people, they buy from people and they want to have a need met and they need that to be done.
It's a quiver in your tools. It is not the tool itself. Selling is selling, and everything else is to support that. Where there's great opportunities, communicate value, negotiate value, deliver, whatever it is, technology can help. But because it's easier and there's a space, I now think, well, I reached out to 50 people on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and hey, I got some new opportunities. But now I'm going to continue that cycle of just follow up by email and not, what I like to say is we got to show up. We can't just rock up. We are sales professionals. We have to show up. And to do that, you have to master that science and art of selling. And not just think the technology is going to carry you all the way there. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole picture.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Al, in summary, we've had good time. Thank you. I've learned a lot again. And every time I spend time with you guys, I'm going away and I'm taking away a couple of top tips. So thank you for that. But before I let you go, where do people get hold of Alan and Tony? What's on the agenda for this year? What should we look out for? And what are you most excited about?
Yeah, me personally, I'm just going to go to the end one because that's the visionary stuff, not the methodical, which I'll leave to Tony. Right, 10xing our audience, I'm excited about, primarily because this needs to get into the hands of more people. There's going to be a bit of downspending, we think, in terms of developing people. So how do we make sure we keep that alive and keep that going? And as we build that audience, we're influencing what I believe is the engine of economies. Because if we're not transacting, if we're not selling, if we're not moving things, well, then we don't need manufacturing, we don't need human resources, we don't need anything. We got to be driving that forward. So I'm excited as we grow that audience, the impact of practical frameworks is stretched. And that's really why our primary is at GrowthMatters International.
Awesome. Tony?
Yeah, Dan. So, I mean, we're really excited by this year because we're going to take on some controversial topics. We're going to take on some alternative views in the world of sales and the world of personal power. For example, the 7 habits of high-performing sales teams has been done many times. But what you'll see with us is that we will definitely be challenging a few of those perceptions to say really what makes high performance in a sales team. So we're really excited by our agenda of topics for this year's Global Connects. To reach us is fairly straightforward, www.growthmattersintl for international.com, which is the easiest way to connect with us.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Guys, it's always a pleasure to meet with you. It's even better to work with you, and I really enjoy it. I think that we're going to have to touch base in a couple of months and see how things are going. And if your top tips have resonated with any of our audience members, hopefully we'll get some comments on it. But just all the best to the Growth Matters team for 2022 as you expand across the globe. Close some deals in South America because you know me, I'd love to go. And from my side at Rocket, I'd like to thank you and have a blessed afternoon. From me, goodbye.
Thank you, Dan.